Entrepreneurs are, I genuinely believe it's a high calling. And by that, I mean you are birthing something into existence that doesn't yet exist. You are creating something unique. And I don't care if you're building a florist shop and there's 100,000 different florist shops out there. The fact is you are the only florist shop that has you there, which makes it immediately different from all the rest, because none of them come with your experiences, with your knowledge, with your backgrounds, with your DNA, with your personality, all of those different things that make you so uniquely you. So as an entrepreneur, I think that happens to be something really, really special.
Welcome friends to the Entrepreneur Speaks. I'm your host, Kofi Anyumedu. Each week, I host an amazing entrepreneur on their journey, successes and challenges. It is my hope that we'll learn from their experiences as we all work towards living a life of passion and purpose. My guest today is Vince Warnock. He's an award-winning business and marketing strategist, coach, and author of Chasing the Insight. An ex-radio announcer with over 20 years in marketing. Vince has founded multiple companies, including Chasing the Insights Academy, where he empowers entrepreneurs and business owners to grow the business they have always dreamed of. Vince joins me today on the Entrepreneur Speaks podcast to share his journey with us, as well as offer useful lessons and also advice for all of us. Welcome to my show, Vince.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Kofi.
Yes, let's kick off by getting to know you some more. Can you please tell us about yourself and how growing up was like?
Oh, man. Now, that's two very specific questions there. My journey back then growing up. Okay, so growing up for me was an interesting time. I grew up in poverty. I grew up in an abusive family and an abusive environment, and had to kind of break out of all of that. So fast forward a number of years, I've always had like an entrepreneurial bug within me. I remember when I was 11 years old, I started my first company. And don't judge me for this, anyone, because at 11 years old with no moral compass in a very dodgy family, I had no idea that anything bad. But my first company was pirating video games for the Commodore 64. I discovered that all the games were done on cassette tape, and I was like, hey, this is real easy. You can just use like a dubbing feature on a stereo and you can copy them. So I went and copied these and sold them and made quite a bit of money as an 11-year-old. So that was my first business. Trust me, every business since then has been very ethical. so I then went on and studied electronics and computer and software engineering. I was a giant nerd that really wanted to be the guy that made all the gadgets for James Bond or Batman or all these other fictional characters, which is something I hadn't considered. None of this was real. So I got very bored with that quickly. But I also discovered that I had two kind of key passions. One of them I was pursuing, which was my passion for technology, but the other passion was around people. It was around understanding why people behave the way they do, understanding their motivations, what drives them, what scares them, all these kind of things. Basically, human behavior. So the more I looked into that side of my passion, the more I realized that electronics engineering wasn't for me. So I transitioned through a number of different careers. As you mentioned, I ended up on radio as an announcer on one of our big radio stations here in New Zealand, which was literally my dream job. I'd wanted to be an on-air announcer since I was 7 years old. I built a crystal radio set. I used to listen to these guys playing music and joking around with each other. And I'm like, wait, you can get paid to play music and to joke around with people? This is the dream job. So years later, I actually achieved my dream job, which was amazing and thoroughly enjoyed it. There was one side of it I didn't enjoy so much, though, was the fact that it's a very low-paying job. There was very little money in radio, and that part was, I had ambitions. I had a young family. I really wanted to provide for them, and radio wasn't the way to do it. So unfortunately, that had to give. And then fast forward to years later, where I found the intersection between my two passions, between technology and human behavior. And that intersection was marketing, particularly digital marketing, and kind of fell into it. I used to do a lot of web design for people, found out I was very good at it, and then discovered that my deep understanding of humans allowed me to really build effective digital marketing strategies and digital marketing tools and things. So that started my digital marketing career, which went on for about 20 years. And honestly, I've enjoyed every minute. I've been in and out of the entrepreneurial side versus the corporate side. I've tried all sorts of different things. Always kind of pulled from one to another. I remember I did some contract work for a not-for-profit here in New Zealand, and they wanted me to build this web platform thing for them. So this app. So I built this app for them, and they came back to me and said, "Oh, hey, we've just entered that app in a number of awards. They were asking us to go over to Las Vegas to be there for the award ceremony. Do you want to come with us?" And I was like, "Wow, okay, hang on. Who are we up against?" And they said, "Oh, Sony, American Airlines, Heineken." I'm like, "Yeah, no, we've got no chance." So save your money. Don't bother going to Las Vegas. Save your money and stay here and put it into something more, more admirable. It just turns out that we actually not only did have a chance, we scooped every gold award that was there and the best in show as well. And I was genuinely gutted. And by the way, the thing that gutted me more than anything was hearing that will.i.am was the guy that was handing out the prizes, and I would have had a chance to shake his hand. I'm like, damn, I really missed out. So they came back to me and said, "Look, we love the work you did, but we really want you to come and work for us full time." And I went, "Nah, look, I'm not interested. Then they wrote a number down on a bit of paper and slipped it across to me, very 80s style. I looked at the number on the piece of paper and thought, yeah, that's going to be an awkward conversation with my wife if I say no to that. So then I got back to the corporate world, and then from there I've built startups and sold them, and then I built probably my biggest startup, which was Common Ledger, and sold that off about, oh man, I'm losing track of time here. I think it was about 6 years ago now, about 5 or 6 years ago, and from there, that was the first time I've been in a position where I went, okay, now I need that thing. What is it called? A job. That's right. I need to actually go out and find a job, because I'd always been headhunted everywhere. So that led me to the team at Cigna, had some conversations with them, found out it was a perfect fit, and went and joined them, and then eventually took the role of Chief Marketing Officer there until January, February 2020. And that was the big transition point for me. I loved my time at Cigna. I had some significant achievements there, published my first book while I was there, and really I enjoyed it so much. But the problem was I was removed from the impact. I was removed from the direct impact I could have on people. And that was something that I consistently felt this tension for. I needed to be at the forefront of helping people. It's just part of my nature. It's part of my who I am. So I made the awkward but not awkward decision. It was awkward to leave a very nice paycheck, but it was the right thing to do because I wasn't feeling fulfilled there. So I spoke with the CEO. We had some really good conversations and explained to her what I wanted to achieve, and she fully supported me. So I moved on from there to write my next book, which then quickly morphed, by the way, into writing 2 books at the same time, launching a podcast, doing a virtual summit, starting a coaching career, and now launching the academy as well, which is I'm so looking forward to. So that was a very whirlwind tour of my eclectic brain and how many times I start and move into different areas.
Wow, very interesting, and but I believe there are a lot of lessons and kind of advice we can all pick up from your journey. So I'll be delving deeply into this journey as we move along, as well as also pick your brain on your soft spot, marketing, on how we can all learn a lot from marketing. So let's look at the journey so far. My focus really is on you working corporate as well as also setting up businesses. How has the journey been so far?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in loving life, in all honesty. Like I said, I came from a very difficult upbringing. Both myself and my wife come from very challenging childhoods. And I had made a decision one day that was it. I'm not going to be a victim anymore. I'm not going to dwell on all of the scars that we have from our childhood and all of the things we had to go through. Instead, I'm going to actually enjoy life. Meeting my wife was the best thing that's ever happened to me. We've been married for 25 years now. She's beyond my best friend, and I can spend hours gushing over how amazing she is. She's just an incredible human being. But then having 2 children as well. And for me, there was a point where I realized I really want my kids to know a couple of things. I want them to know a lot of things. I want them to know they're loved. I want them to feel supported and all this kind of stuff. But there were two things that were really important to me to install into our children. One of those was that I wanted them to not just look at circumstance and look at things and accept it at face value. And the example I give my kids is don't just, if someone comes up and punches you in the face, that's obviously a horrible thing to happen. But don't just look at that and go, that's horrible. How dare they do that to me, and punch them back. Actually try to take a moment, and it's difficult, but try to take a moment to understand what's going on in someone's life and someone's mind that would drive them to do something like that. Like, what is happening in their life? And I learned this lesson the hard way myself growing up. So as I said, I grew up in abuse. Home was a horrible environment for me, but I had my escape, which was school. And that's why I love technology and I love learning and I love pushing myself, because school was a happy place for me. And I was at age 11 when I discovered something I hadn't come across before. So I had a bully at home, but now at age 11, I discovered a bully at school. And suddenly for 2 years, this guy tormented me and I had no safe place. I would go home and get abused. I'd go to school and get abused. I had no place in between that I could feel safe. That's a horrible environment for a child. But at age 12, at the end of age 12, we went to what we call college. Americans call high school. We went to high school, and he went to a different high school from me. So I was free. It was the best feeling ever, man. I was like, oh, this is wonderful. But I also decided that when I go to high school, I didn't want to be a victim anymore. I wanted to learn how to defend myself. I wanted to learn martial arts. I wanted to learn. So I wasn't always the guy that got picked on. So I threw myself into that, and I got very good at it. I trained for would have been 5 years, 4 years. It was 4 years. It was when he got transferred back to my school, and I'm like, okay, this is the moment that I loved in all those 80 cheesy movies, where you're the underdog and suddenly you come out on top, and the bully's there, and you're triumphant. And I was like, oh, this is going to be glorious. I've been waiting for this time for a long time. And he got transferred to our school. He walked past me, so I yelled out his name and a couple of expletives. And of course, in his true nature, he turned around and took a few swings at me and missed. And I'm like, ha, ha, ha. And I was there going, in my mind, I'm just picturing this being an 80s movie, by the way. It's sad insight into my mind. I picture most things through the lens of a movie. So then took those swings at me, and then I finally struck him and laid him out. And he's laying on the ground. And this is the moment that I thought was going to be incredible. But I'm looking at this guy laying there and thought, why do I not feel great? Why do I not feel like this is the moment that I've been waiting for? And fast forward to being in the principal's office, because if you're in a fight at our school, you end up in the principal's office. And the principal pulled me aside and he said, look, asked me what happened, and I told him and everything. And he was like, do you know why he got transferred to our school? And in true, 17-year-old fashion, I'm like, I don't care. I was trying to be all staunch. And he goes, I think you should care. He said, this kid grew up in abuse. He grew up with a father who used to beat him and his sister and his mother relentlessly since they were babies. And the reason he got transferred here now is because his father beat the mother so badly that she actually passed away in front of the children. So the children witnessed their father murder their mother. Wow. So he had moved in with his auntie and uncle, and they then transferred to our school. And I remember saying to the principal, well, I didn't know that. And he goes, no, I wouldn't expect that you would. He said, but I do expect that of all the people that could possibly have understood him and what he's going through, you may have been the one. And that was the moment I realized that I wasn't the hero in the story. I was the villain. I was the guy that could have been there for this guy, could have helped him to understand that this is not acceptable behavior, that actually you don't need to mimic what you've grown up with. Been there to help him to deal with the anger and the pain that he was going through and the scars that he no doubt had. But instead, I was the guy that just mimicked the behavior that he was used to. I struck him just as his father had struck him so many times. So that was a huge wake-up call for me. That was the moment where I realized you can't accept people at face value. You can't look at someone's behavior and judge them based on their behavior. You can judge the behavior. That behavior is not acceptable. I don't condone that in any way whatsoever. However, this was somebody who was in a lot of pain and hurting. So I wanted my kids to not have to go through that situation that I did. I wanted them to learn that without having to go through all of this. So that was important to me. But the second thing that was really important, and this ties to the entrepreneurial side, was I didn't want them to be reliant on employment or, working for a corporate environment or working for someone. Because as we've discovered, particularly with 2020, man, jobs are fickle. Global things can change. Outside influences can impact your employment, and then suddenly you're left without a job. And this happened to so many different people. But I wanted my kids to know that you can create your own wealth. You can actually put yourself out there. You can try different things. You can work for a corporate and still have a business on the side. So both of my kids started their own businesses when they were really young. My daughter, when she was 11, I think she ran a dance school teaching hip hop dancing to young kids. And my son, when he was 7, started his own comic book, which was hilarious. He was a really good writer, terrible artist, and he'll tell you that. Absolutely terrible artist, but he didn't care. He was a great storyteller, so lots of people bought that book. So they've always had their own businesses. But to teach them that, I couldn't just say to them, hey, this is really important. Make sure you can create your own wealth. I had to demonstrate that. So for me to create an environment in our house where my children and my wife knew that you could take risks, that you could try things, that you could put yourself out there, you can learn from your failures, all these different lessons that were so, so important, I had to do that myself. So that's always been the driving factor for me. And that's why I love being in and out of entrepreneurial life, in and out of corporate life. Although, to be fair, at the moment, I think I'm pretty much in entrepreneurial life for the rest of my life now. I'm pretty much done with the corporate environment, although in saying that, I'll probably end up back there one day. But so that's kind of how that transition has always gone. It's been really important for me to create an environment for my family where they can flourish, where they can learn that wealth is something that is attracted to us, that we can create ourselves, and that we can always make sure that we're not reliant on other people. We can kind of plot our own destiny.
Okay, that's very interesting. A lot of lessons and to be picked up. But I would still like us to focus on some challenges you've encountered along the line. Can you share some major challenges you've encountered along this journey?
Oh, absolutely, man. I can tell you now that there's so many challenges. Like, there's challenges in different industries. There's challenges when you're building companies. There's challenges of finding new markets and all these kind of things. But the biggest challenges by far are always in your own mind. And for me, one of the biggest things I've always faced is what I call the fear of being seen. So it's the fear of putting yourself out there because you're worried about being judged. And this is very much tied to imposter syndrome or imposter complex. And it's something that I've had to battle with, all my life, actually, and probably will battle with for all my life. But it's something that has sabotaged me at different stages of my career. It's something where there's an opportunity there, but you think if I take that opportunity or if I try that, I may fail. And if I fail, people may judge me or they may think less of me or and you don't feel worthy, so you don't try. So that's the biggest thing that I've had to learn to battle with. I've learned some really good coping mechanisms with that over the years. One of them is my theory, which is just to embrace imposter syndrome. I remember when I was a lot younger, I was I call myself a young business guy. I don't even know how to define me. I was working in a corporate environment. I was quite young, and I won tickets to this business breakfast. I was like, oh man, this is going to be amazing. It was the Oceanic representative for Adobe. And this is way back in the days where Photoshop 2 had just come out, just to show how old I am right now. But I won tickets to this breakfast, and I thought, this is going to be fantastic. I'm going to learn so much from this guy. And I knew that if I'm going to go to this breakfast, that everyone there is going to be dressed in a suit. I didn't own a suit. I had no money at the time. It was my earliest stage of my career. So I went down to a secondhand shop, bought the worst suit I could find. It's the only one that fit me. And when I say fit me, barely fit me. Like, the sleeves went down to my knuckles. It was this horrible shade of light gray, double-breasted. It just looked a really ill-fitting suit. It looked horrible, but that was all I could afford. So I bought that and I turned up to this event. And I remember sitting at this table with all of these guys that seemed to have their life sorted. They're all in really nice suits. They're all a lot older. And I realized I do not fit in here. I'm thinking, what am I doing? I stand out like a sore thumb. And this guy got up and he presented, and I wrote down pages and pages of notes. It really was amazing. Like, he's an incredible speaker, really inspirational. And he came over afterwards to each of the different tables, and he asked the same thing of each table. He said, do you guys have any questions? And I remember thinking, this is my moment, right? This is the time where I have the opportunity to ask something really intelligent. And I still remember my brain going, come on, man, come on, just think of something really intelligent. He got to our table and I just blurted out the first thing I could think of. And my brain just went, dude, that wasn't intelligent. You're a moron. I'm out of here. But the question I asked him was, at what point did you know that you had made it? And I almost heard the snigger around the table, like that everyone kind of looked at me like, oh, that's a silly question kind of thing. And I thought the same. But he surprised me. He turned around and he said, actually, that's a really good question. And everyone kind of paused for a moment. And he said, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I have this morning routine. And at this point, by the way, as a young business guy, as a young person who really wants to achieve and wants to succeed, I'm going, holy moly, I am going to hear an inside secret from this successful guy. He's going to let me in on his daily routine. This is going to be powerful. So I wrote every word that came out of his mouth. I was scribbling it down as fast as I can, taking all these notes. And he said, every morning I go through the same routine. He said, I deliberately wake up early. And I'm like, oh my goodness, deliberately early. This is really good. And he goes, I go into the bathroom. And I'm like, ooh, bathroom. Okay, so I write down bathroom. He goes, I pour cold water into the sink. So I underline cold. That must be important. He goes, I splash that water on my face. I look in the mirror and I go, ha, today's the day they find out you're a fraud. And I went, what? And he goes, man, I've never felt like I've made it. I always feel like the dumbest guy in the room. I've always felt like an outsider. He said, and then he did the thing that really did surprise me. He kind of indicated around my table and he said, most of us do. And that did something quite profound for me because that's something I'd always felt and he had picked up on that. But when I looked around that table, I suddenly realized if he's saying that most of us at this table feel that way, that means that I've got as much right to be here as everybody else. And these guys who I thought had their lives sorted, if they're feeling the same insecurities that I am, they're feeling the same imposter complex or imposter syndrome that I am, then I do have as much right to be here as them. So it taught me two very valuable lessons. It taught me that I had a right to be there and that, I feel just as insecure as everybody else. But it also taught me empathy towards other people. I'm looking at these guys going, man, they need help as much as I do. Like their lives are as a hot mess as mine is. So that started my kind of understanding of imposter syndrome. And at that point I thought, you know what? Instead of fighting this thing, which constantly tries to sabotage me, I'm going to acknowledge it. I'm going to say, I see you there, imposter syndrome. Okay, I see you in the corner. You just stay over there. That's all good. I'm not going to let you sabotage. I appreciate that you're there and that's going to make me feel certain ways, but I'm choosing not to act on those feelings. So it made me realize that I'm going to embrace this. I'm going to know that everybody else is feeling as much as me, so I can create an environment around them where they feel like they're not judged, where they feel like they're accepted, where they feel like they're not the dumbest person there. So that was a pivotal learning point for me through my career, because whenever I went into a new environment, either building my own company or going into another, like a corporate where I had to build a team, I immediately wanted to create a safe space within that team. So like a psychological safe space where people knew that they weren't going to be judged. They knew they could take risks, they could take chances, they could experiment with things, they could challenge themselves. And if they fail, they're not going to be judged. So that was really important to me. And that is still, even to this day, the biggest thing I get challenged with personally. I'm putting together a group program at the moment, and every now and then I'm looking at that group program going, what right do I have to talk on that? And then I'll go back to my notes and go, oh, that's right, 20 years worth of experience, massive successes along the way, many companies bought and created and sold. Okay, I might know a thing or two here, so I might be able to put myself forward. So that's kind of the biggest challenge, I think, that not just me, I think most entrepreneurs fear. We all hear about fear of failure and fear of success, but fear of putting yourself out there because you're going to be judged, and fear of other people kind of looking down on you or other people thinking that you are an imposter, just like you feel like you are yourself.
That's rich. But in talking about your challenges, you've brought up some useful lessons we can all learn. Are there other lessons you would like to share with my listeners?
Oh, definitely. Oh man, how many hours have we got here? No. I think probably the two, or there's three. I'll give you three lessons here. And these are,
Sure.
when I'm coaching people, these are the three things I have to install very, very quickly in them. The first one is just, and I'm going to totally steal Nike's thing here, but just do it. Just put yourself out there and do it. And for me, if I look at 2020, so in 2020, I left Cigna. I left the safety net of a very nice paycheck to go, right, I'm just putting myself out there. I'm writing I'm writing my 2 books. I'm launching the podcast, all these kind of things. But every step of that journey through 2020, I would look at it and go, right, I want to launch a podcast. And then I started plotting out what that would look like and realized it's going to be 2 or 3 years before I launch. And the main reason is I thought I had to soundproof my studio. I had to have the right equipment. I had to have the structure all in place. I had to have like 6 months of marketing roadmap to be able to put myself out there, all of these different things. And then I just realized one day I woke up and thought, what am I doing? You're a moron, Vince. Just pull your head out of your butt and actually just launch the thing. It'll get better over time. But the fact is, if you start it now, all these things that you're putting off, all these things that you're afraid to launch, if you launch them now, the failures that you have early on are going to have a very small audience. They're not going to mean anything in the bigger scheme of things. If you stuff it up, guess what? You just do it again. If you make a mistake, you just make a different decision and try something different. So just all those times where you hesitate as entrepreneurs, as business owners, those things that you want to really try or you want to experiment with, and you're kind of holding yourself back. My biggest advice to you is just put a stake in the ground, take an irreversible action. Like for me, it's putting it out on social media. So one day I decided, right, I'm going to pull my head out of my butt. I'm going to post on social and say, I'm launching a podcast in 6 weeks' time. Who's interested? Or I'm doing a virtual summit in 6 weeks' time. I always choose 6 weeks for some reason. I'm launching one in 6 weeks' time. Who wants in? And then once you make that action, it'll be really embarrassing to not achieve that. So if you say you're launching a podcast in 6 weeks and 6 weeks comes and you don't have a podcast, that's really embarrassing. So you have to make it work. So I launched it and it wasn't perfect. The audio quality, I'm an audio engineer, by the way, so that was really important to me. But I realized, you know what? As long as people can hear you clearly, as long as people can understand what you're saying and that is good content, they aren't going to care too much, Vince. Stop worrying about it. Most people can't hear what you hear when they're listening to audio. So get over yourself, stop being an audio snob and just do it. So that's one of my biggest pieces of advice for every entrepreneur. Put yourself out there now. Don't delay. The second thing is, which I alluded to, is experimentation. And this is about not being afraid to try different things. Right? We all hear about the moment Clubhouse is launched. If you're not in Clubhouse, I will tell you it's amazing, but also warn you it's incredibly addictive. So just be careful. But Clubhouse is a social media platform where a lot of entrepreneurs are. You have these audio discussions and things. It is so much fun. But try something. Try hosting a room in there. Just try putting yourself out there and experimenting with different channels, with different methods, with different marketing messages. Just keep playing around until you find the things that are working for you. Just look for those constant improvements. So that's my second piece of advice, is make sure that you're experimenting as much as possible. And then the third thing is get in front of your customers. Like if you can imagine the most that you could get in front of your customers, do even more than that. And by that, I mean, a lot of people and a lot of the entrepreneurs I work with, they'll try things like, okay, they're putting together a course. So, right, they'll think to themselves, I have to have the entire course plotted out. I have to have all of the content sorted, all the videos recorded, everything ready so that I can then go out and market this to, my potential customers. But what I'm teaching them is no, don't do that at all. Have the name and the basic concept of what you want to launch, what type of course you are, and then get in front of the customers as quickly as possible. And there's so many different ways you can do that. You can literally go down to a coffee shop, down to a cafe, look for a line of people, stand there and say, hey, look, if I buy your coffee for you, can you give me a couple of minutes of your time? And just to answer a few questions, I'm trying something at the moment. I really love your feedback. Or jump in Facebook groups and go, hey, I'm thinking of launching something. I'd love a few people to interview. I'm not selling you anything. I just really want to get your opinion on a few different things, and just ask them questions. Ask them what their challenges are. Ask them what the obstacles would be. Start to talk about the concept that you're thinking of launching, and then say to them, what are the things that make you stop and pause when you hear that? Pause for the positive, like, hey, I should listen to this person, but also the things that would make you apprehensive. So just get in front of customers as soon and as often as you possibly can, because what will happen is you will either go down those two routes. You'll either go down preparing the entire course and then trying to retrofit it to fit all of your different customers, like launching it and then going, okay, that bit doesn't quite work for them, so I'm going to have to tell that in a different way. Or you can go, I'm launching this thing, and build it as you go along. Like build it with your customers there with you, almost like co-creation. And then what will happen then is you are building something that is best fit for them. It is a no-brainer for them. And that will help you with your marketing like 100-fold. Plus, by the way, interviewing customers, there's a secret sauce in there. There's an element of gold that you need, right? As well as being able to validate what you're building, as well as being able to kind of pivot and change different things based on their feedback, they will also give you every marketing message that you need. Because you record this, I always recommend you record the conversations with them, because the way that they explain their problems, the way that they explain their objections, the way that they explain what they're thinking is the marketing messaging that you need to use back on them, because you're using it in their own words. And I'll give you a really good example of this. This is, despite, by the way, this is one of my mantras. I'm known for getting in front of customers as much as possible, but I fail at it as well as everybody else. And I was talking to a couple of clients that I have, and they were new clients that had come on board. They really wanted to, because of COVID in 2020, they really wanted to pivot their business, and they needed to put themselves out there on the internet. They were a face-to-face kind of bricks and mortar store. So I was helping them with that. And one of the things I said to them is, look, you've got a website, but one of your issues is around search engine optimization. And I said, like you have some issues around that. I can do a complete SEO audit. I'll come back to you with my recommendations, and we will get you up the SERPs, like get you up the rankings on Google. And these two women just looked at me and they just shaking their heads. And I'm like, huh? And they said, look, we don't care about all this SEO stuff. We just want to be found on Google. And I'm like, now, of course, SEO is being found on Google, but I was using industry terms. I was using these things that made no sense to them. They didn't care about my terminology. They didn't care about all these things that we've learned over our years in marketing. The only thing they cared about was their understanding of it, which is, we're not found on Google. How can we be found on Google? So I said to them, okay, well, how about this? At the moment, it's really hard to find you on Google. I'm going to look into that by doing an audit and finding out why that is. And then let's get you found on Google. And they're like, yay. so you've just got to get in front of customers as much as possible. They will give you every marketing message that you need.
Very interesting. So where do you draw your inspiration from, Vince? Where do you draw your inspiration from?
Where do I draw? Oh, man, that's a superhero movies. No, in Star Wars. I'm a giant nerd. I think inspiration to me, I mean, I have my motivations rather than inspirations. So for me, as I said, one of the things that's really important to me is creating an environment for my family. So create an environment for my wife and my kids where they feel like they can flourish. So that to me is a motivation. Another motivation I have, the other aspect of why, is I get quite a sense of satisfaction in seeing other people succeed. I had, despite my upbringing, despite, as I said, growing up in poverty and abuse, I had through the years a number of people who believed in me. I had a teacher when I was at what we call intermediate school. It's ages 11 and 12. It's like a transition school. And I had a teacher there who was the first person to ever make me feel like I could achieve something in my life. Like, he believed in me. And I want everybody to experience that. I want everyone to feel that. I want everyone to feel like that they can put themselves out there and they can succeed. So that is, for me, a large part of the why I do what I do. I love seeing that transition in people. I love seeing them expand to feel empowered. It's also why I very rarely do the do it for you type services. I don't come into a business and go, right, I'm going to take over all of your marketing. I'm going to, put together your campaigns, put together your brand messaging, etc. I would much rather work with them to help them come up with the brand messaging, to help them to shape their campaigns, to help them to put themselves out there, because that sense of empowerment means I can come in there, have a huge impact, but then they can feel like they can do this themselves. They can feel like they can take the next steps and succeed. So that to me is a huge part of my why. So that keeps me wanting to be the best in the game. Like, that keeps me wanting to consistently learn, to consistently challenge myself, to consistently come up with new methodologies, new ways of approaching things, and to look at what works and what doesn't. So inspiration wise, I find inspiration in pretty much anything. There are people that I admire in the industry. I love having challenging conversations about different approaches to marketing or different approaches to entrepreneurship. So that inspires me, those conversations and things. But really, it does come down to those motivations, those why I do what I do.
So what would you do differently if you were to start all over again?
That's actually quite easy for me. I was asked this, I actually think it was my son asked me this recently. Like, he was joking around, pretending to interview me. I think he wants to be a podcaster. And he said, what would you do different, Dad? I said, that's simple. I would start earlier. I would take an approach that success is inevitable. Like, forget about all the doubts and all the fears and everything. Forget about worrying if something's going to succeed or fail. Like, the fact is, the only guarantee in anything that you're launching, in anything you're creating, the only guarantee in there is if you don't create it, if you don't launch, if you don't put yourself out there, you definitely will fail at it, because you can't succeed unless you actually try it. So why not just give it a shot anyway? Why not just think to yourself, you know what? Success is inevitable. Like, even if I make mistakes in there, I can just make different decisions and then we'll get success at some point. If I keep turning up consistently and keep turning up and showing up and trying to improve myself and trying to do better at it, at some point it will succeed. So if you come at it with that attitude, I would launch earlier every single time. Like with my podcast, I should have launched that 2 years ago. With the coaching business. In fact, I didn't even launch coaching, by the way. That was something that was thrust upon me. Like, as soon as I left Cigna and I'm writing my book, the amount of people that suddenly realized, oh, you must have time on your hands, Vince. Help. I need your help. I want you to coach me. I want you to consult with us. And then suddenly I found I was doing coaching. I'm like, okay. And then found that I thoroughly enjoyed it, but also realized I should have been doing that 5 or 6 years ago. I should have been trying to help even more people, and even more and more and more people all along my journey. So yeah, the only thing I would do different, the biggest thing I'd do different is to launch earlier. Like, if you're uncomfortable and you're thinking now's not the right time, that is the exact right time to launch.
So listeners, my guest, as mentioned, is Vince Warnock. Vince is an award-winning business and marketing strategist. So I cannot end any conversation with him without talking about marketing and business strategy. So I would like to spend my next few minutes talking about business, talking about marketing, talking about the book he's written. So Vince, my podcast is meant to encourage young business owners and will-be entrepreneurs on their journey. Because through listening to stories of people such as you, they're able to pick useful lessons, be able to pick patterns, and be able to pick lessons they can carry on in business. How important is marketing to the growth of a business? How important is marketing to the growth of a business?
Oh, it is absolutely essential. And to help you understand why, I think I'll boil it down to the essence of marketing, because there's a lot of confusion about the difference between marketing and sales. And I'll put this out there. It's a controversial view, but only if you're talking to salespeople, because they don't want to be called marketers. But the reality is there is no difference between marketing and sales. Both of them achieve the same thing. And when you understand this fundamental aspect of marketing, you'll know why it is so pivotal for a business. Essentially, marketing is looking at a potential customer. So looking at the potential customer that you have, looking at their current state, and in their current state, they have a gap. They have a need. They have a hole in their life there that your product, your service, whatever it is that you're doing, should essentially fill. So they have this current state, and then they have a future state where that need is no longer there, where that hole is now being filled by your products, by whatever it is, your service, your offering, etc. So they have these two different states, and the role of marketing is really, really simple, and it's the same role that sales have. The role is to talk to them in their current state and get them to come to their own conclusion that that is their current state. So to help them to come to that conclusion, and then get them to imagine what life would be like in that future state. So if you're, for example, let's think, for example, with the Academy program that I'm launching, right? If you're an entrepreneur that goes, okay, I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to marketing. I'm freaking out about this. I don't know how to put myself out there. Everything seems overwhelming and scary. So that is the gap that you have as an entrepreneur. You're listening to this and that's you. You'll be sitting there going, okay, I don't know what I'm doing yet. I know what that feels like. And then I'm going to get you, if I'm a marketer or a salesperson, I will get you to imagine what that future's like, where you feel totally empowered to be able to have the right conversations with people. You feel empowered to be able to try different things, to have consistent messaging, consistent branding, to have consistent campaigns out there and everything. So imagine what that life is like, where you feel quite confident in all of that. Now, if you can achieve that as a marketer or as a salesperson, if you can get them to imagine their current state or to picture their current state and then imagine what it'll be like with that needs met, then you are so clearly the path for them to get to that needs, to that future state. So you are the bridge that's going to get them from point A, which is where they have that need, to point B, where they're unlocked and their potential is there and they feel empowered. So this is the role of marketing and sales, and it is the aspect that every business owner needs. You cannot succeed unless you're making sales. You cannot succeed unless people are going from point A to point B, and that is the role of marketing. That is the role of sales.
So how about digital marketing? How important is digital marketing to the growth of every business?
Well, I mean, I'm a digital marketer, so I'm completely, utterly biased here. But I would say it this way, though: you can succeed without digital marketing. I know that's a controversial view from digital marketers, but I know bricks and mortar stores out there that just get a lot of foot traffic. They get a lot of word of mouth, and they succeed through that. But digital marketing unlocks so much potential for you. It unlocks audience. In fact, I'll give you a good example of this. One of the companies I'm coaching in Melbourne, they are a knitting cafe. So they have a bricks and mortar store where you go in, you grab your coffee and your scone and jam, and you learn to knit, and then you buy your supplies from them. And then they have a couple of additional kind of ways that they get revenue from. One of them is they'll do a vineyard tour where you go and you learn to knit, and then you drink a lot of wine, and then you do karaoke and dancing. And then they also have knitting cruises where you go on these cruise ships, you learn to knit, you drink a lot of wine, you do some karaoke and dancing. There's a consistent theme here with these ladies. But this is their model. And one of the things that happened with COVID is all of a sudden every income stream ceased. So they all of a sudden, no one could come to their store because they were in lockdown. Vineyard tours and cruise ships, forget about it, they were cancelled. So all of a sudden, these women had all of the same overheads they've always had, but they had no way for them to bring in any money. So I couldn't leave it at that. They were helping me with my book. I was interviewing them for one of the current books I'm writing, and they kind of hit the wall and said, "Look, Vince, we'd love to keep helping you, but right now we're just not in the right headspace. We're freaking out. We don't know where we're going to get money. We're basically going to have to shut up shop." And I just couldn't stand by and allow that. I was like, nah, you guys are awesome. I can't leave that there. What about if we at least try and get a revenue stream for you? What about if we took all of your products? They got 850 products in their shop. What about if we took all of your products and put them online? And they said to me, "Oh, well, Vince, look, we've been there. We've done that. We paid someone $10,000 to build a website. He never even completed the website and he disappeared. Then we asked somebody else to come in and finish it for us. And he looked at it and said, yes, I can do that, but I'll have to rebuild it because I'm not familiar with that technology. And that's going to cost you another $10,000. And by the way, I don't do this aspect and that aspect." And they were just like, "We're so confused. We don't even know how to ask the right questions." And I said to them, "Okay, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to do it for you because you can't afford me. But what if I could teach you how to build an online shop? What if I could show you Shopify, which, by the way, is ridiculously easy to use? And what if I could help you to get all of your products from your current store, physical store, into your online space and launch that with you?" And they immediately said no. And the reason they said no is because they thought they were technologically challenged. So they said, "No, we'll never be able to learn this." And I said, "Okay, well, here's my challenge to you. I'm going to teach you over a weekend. If we fail and you don't feel confident enough to be able to do this by the end of the weekend, I will buy you both a bottle of gin." And they were like, "Okay, you've got a deal." So over the weekend, not only did I teach them basic principles of e-commerce and how to put themselves out there and how to use Shopify, they actually got their entire online shop up and running. Made it really easy because their point of sale system in the store, you can literally just go export and then import into Shopify. It was so simple. But by the end of the weekend, they had launched their online shop. So that gave them at least a revenue stream. But the thing that they didn't realize is they were a bricks and mortar store that was serving a small area in Melbourne. And they had people come from maybe some of the neighboring regions, neighboring areas in Melbourne to come in to, learn to knit and to buy their supplies. What they didn't know is that their little niche store in Melbourne actually provides a service that most of Australia needs. A lot of people in Australia were wondering where to get their knitting supplies from. We're wanting to learn. We're wanting some sense of community. We're wanting all these different aspects that these two women provided. So the second they put an online shop up there and then started to replicate the experience that they had in the cafe, minus the coffee and scones, in that online space, they unlocked a huge amount of potential. They discovered within the first 2 weeks that they were making more money online than they've ever made in their shop or on the cruises or on the vineyard tours. They also got a notification from Shopify to say you're now the 15th highest transaction shop in Australia. All because they didn't realize there was an audience out there waiting for them. And that's what digital marketing allows you to tap into. It gives you access to people that you wouldn't normally get access to. It gives you access to a global market in a lot of cases. I mean, even for me with my coaching and my academy program and that, the majority of people I deal with, I'm based in Wellington, New Zealand, We are on the bottom end of the world here. We're the first country, one of the first countries to see the light. So we're always talking from the future, which is kind of cool. But most of my clients are from the US, are from Canada, are from South America. Most of them come from countries that I'm not physically in. And digital marketing allows me to get in front of these people, for them to hear about my services, to hear about how I'm transforming businesses, and then to reach out and to do business with me. So that's for me the biggest reason, is it gives you so much more potential and so much more scope and unlocks so many more markets.
Thank you so much. You are the author of Chasing the Insights. Please tell us about that book.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this was a passion project for me, mainly because I have certain systems that I've put in place, certain processes and things that I've created over the years, and I know these work because I've done them, and that's how I have had success. And at Cigna, one of the things that happened was, as soon as I joined Cigna, I had an immediate impact on the business. Like, I took their online sales from, I think, about between 2 and 4%. I can't remember the exact figure when I started there, but it was about 2 to 4% of their sales were done online. Everything else was done by telemarketing or face-to-face. And by the time I finished, or even by the time I took this chief marketing officer role there, our online sales were around 40% of our total revenue. And that was from the systems that I put in place. Now, this caused ripples throughout the rest of the Cigna markets around the world. So a number of the countries wanted my time. They wanted to find out what is these systems you put in place, Vince? Like, how is it that you, managed to get these successes? So they would all ask me for an hour of my time per week, where I could dial into them and talk through, what I have achieved and how I've done it. But the problem with that is, when you've got 30 or 40 markets around the world, all wanting an hour each per week, that's a full-time job. So I thought, that's not going to be enjoyable for me. So instead of that, how about I just write a book, and then they can all buy the book and I'll get some money for it. So that's where it kind of came about from. But really, the book is the type of book that I would want to read. So it's in 3 parts. The first part is the framework that I've created to allow you to experiment with marketing, particularly with digital marketing. But it's a framework that enables you to try new things and to try to get what I call incremental gains, like a compound interest approach to success. So the first part of the book goes into detail into that process. It's called the Chaser method. Then the second part of the book is probably the most important, because one of the things I discovered over the years is, it doesn't matter if you have a framework. It doesn't matter if you have a system or a process. If you don't have the right mindset and the right approach to that process, it will fail. So I really spent the next part of the book digging into the mindset and how to cultivate the right mindset for bringing experimentation into marketing. So these are things like cultivating curiosity, which is one of the most important things. It's building fortitude. It's removing cognitive bias from you. It's all of these different aspects that are going to help you to succeed with experimentation. And then the third part of the book, I wanted the book to be as practical as possible. So the third part of the book is literally practical experiments that you can try. So it's a number of experiments from myself, and then I also reached out to some other leaders in digital marketing around the world. So we've got Michael Brenner from the US, we've got Kieran Rogers from the UK, we've got Tim Pointer from here in New Zealand. These are leaders that I respect. So each of them gave a bunch of experiments that they recommend you try as well. So that was the premise of the book. It was really well received. It was just so humbling when we launched, and seeing the amount of people that were impacted by it. And you always, as an author, by the way, just as a side note, you always get people that come back and go, "Oh, that was a great book, Vince. Thanks." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." I'm thinking, you would tell that to me even if you thought it was a terrible book, because no one likes conflict and no one likes to tell you, "Oh, that's a bad book, Vince." But it was when I started getting feedback that was, I remember a woman, Veronica in Australia, who sent me this feedback and said, "I just want you to know, I've just gone through your book with one of my clients, and they're implementing your process, your framework, and they're already seeing results in this. So thank you so much." And it was like, wow, they're actually using this practically. And then I had the embarrassing but also amazing incident where I went up to meet an agency in Auckland here in New Zealand, and I'm sitting down with this agency. I didn't really know them very well at all, and they were sitting there talking about what they wanted to do with this project. And they said, and then we're going to bring in this thing called coffee line test, Vince. And this is in the book. It's actually a system I created for getting customer feedback. And they said, we're going to bring in coffee line tests. And I'm like, coffee line tests? And I'm looking at them, they said, yeah. And then they started to explain coffee line tests to me. And I'm like, what is happening here? This is my system. Why are they pitching it back to me? And then I looked, and on the bench behind the woman that was talking to me was my book. And then she looked at me and she suddenly, like, she read the expression on my face and suddenly went, wait a minute, you're Vince Warnock. I went, yeah. Oh, this is so embarrassing. And she suddenly realized she was telling me my own theory, my own system. And I was, honestly, I was so happy. It was one of the greatest moments because I realized that the book had gone beyond just my network. It had gone beyond the people that I know, and it was actually impacting companies all around the world. So that was really exciting, man. I just love that aspect. And by the way, highly encourage every entrepreneur at some point in your life, write a book. It is the coolest process ever. It helps you to articulate your thought process, articulate the way that you operate. It's just something that everyone, I think, should try.
Thank you so much. So where can my listeners get copies of your book?
Oh, that's easy. The best way to get in touch with me, to find out my podcast, to find out my book, is all at chasingtheinsights.com. So on there, you'll see a menu item, but you've got a link there where you can buy the book on Amazon or any good book retailer. But also, I've got my podcast there and links to my group programs, my summits, all those kind of things that are coming up. So yeah, chasingtheinsights.com.
Thank you so much. We are just about ending our conversation for today, but I cannot end without asking for tips for my listeners. So what would be some marketing tips that you like to offer my listeners who are growing their businesses?
Oh, wow. Okay. Man, I always find this one challenging when people ask me this because I'm like, there's so many different things I want to talk about. One of them is get really good at telling your story. And by your story, I mean not just your elevator pitch. I do a lot of work with entrepreneurs on how to craft a really good message and a really good story. Because as an entrepreneur, your story actually counts so much more than you realize, especially in the early days. If you're a solopreneur or you're a coach or you're building a very small business, to compete against the bigger brands, to compete against everyone else in the market, the story is the thing that's going to get you noticed. And the story is going to get the thing that makes people want to know you, like you, and trust you. So you need to get really good at that. So to do that, I've got a whole system that I've created around this called the Beats method. But essentially it is work out your elevator pitch. That is who your target market is, so who it is that you serve, what their need is, and how you meet that need. So that's your elevator pitch. But then also to look at map out your life a bit and look at all the pivotal points that have led you to where you are now. So what is it about your journey that's made you so passionate about doing what you do and why you turn up every day to serve your customers and to help them? So because when you can craft this story, when you can tell clearly why you do what you're doing, not just what you do, but why you're doing what you're doing, that is going to get you noticed, and that is going to get you know, like, and trust, which is a really important factor of marketing. So that's my number one tip there. The second thing is peel back the curtains. And by this, I mean, show people behind the scenes in your business and your life. Don't show them all the mess because honestly, most of us are hot messes. Most of us have stuff where you're like, no, if people saw that, they'll just judge me too much. But what I mean by that is show some vulnerability, show some authenticity. People love to feel like they're special. They love to create what's called a pseudo-social relationship with you. And good examples of this are with companies that, like, for example, we used to do ads, like we'd film advertisements for TV and internet. And whenever we go on the film shoot, one of the things we would do is we would just take our phones and we would film behind the scenes and talk to the actors and talk about why they love being on the ad, or talk about, getting them to get their makeup done, going, oh, this is so embarrassing, I'm getting makeup done. And people feel special. They feel like they're being let in on a secret. So they immediately build a bit of affinity towards you and towards your brand. And it's a really good way to build trust and a really good way to build that rapport with potential customers. So start to look at, if you're not already, start to show behind those curtains, start to show behind the scenes, and show a bit of your personality and yourself in there as well. And then I guess the third tip, what am I going to pull out of my bag here? The third tip is a way to get really good feedback from your customers. So I talked about coffee line tests, so I'm not going to rehash that one, but one of the things that we do is surveys. And by surveys, I don't just mean putting a survey out there, but I mean actually engaging with people over Zoom or over a call or face-to-face when you can do face-to-face. But what it is about saying, look, I'm not going to sell you anything. I'm not going to try and force my services on you. I just want your opinion. I want to know from you what your story is, how you make decisions around this area, what are your reservations, what are your objections, all these kind of things. If you can get time with people face to face, you will get such valuable gold from them. You'll get all, as I said earlier, the marketing messaging, but also you'll get a follower, because when you ask people's opinion, when you ask for their input in things, they then feel a bond between you and them. And a good example of this is one of my favorite authors of all time, Jonah Berger. He wrote the book Contagious, which is a book I highly recommend every marketer read, second only to mine, of course. But Jonah was putting his new book out there, and one of the things he did on social media was he said, "Hey guys, here's 3 different or 4 different cover designs. I would love your opinion on this. Which one do you prefer?" And immediately I'm like, wow, he actually cares what we think. This is an author who I look up to. So I put my feedback in there, and I don't even care if he chooses the one that I said I preferred. The fact that I was actually asked for an opinion on that made it really special, and it made me feel like I have more of a connection towards him, and also made me pre-order the book before even knowing what the cover was that he chose. So it's an awesome way to build that trust and that rapport with your potential customers.
Thank you so much. I'm just about signing off. Do you have any last words for my listeners?
I think the last thing I'd want any entrepreneur to know is that you are something special. Entrepreneurs are, I genuinely believe it's a high calling. And by that, I mean, you are birthing something into existence that doesn't yet exist. You are creating something unique. And I don't care if you're building a florist shop and there's 100,000 different florist shops out there. The fact is, you are the only florist shop that has you there, which makes it immediately different from all the rest, because none of them come with your experiences, with your knowledge, with your background, with your DNA, with your personality, all of those different things that make you so uniquely you. So as an entrepreneur, I think that happens to be something really, really special. So I always want all entrepreneurs to know that they are a very small percentage of the population that has the courage, that has the strength to be able to put themselves out there and try and birth something into this world. And that is worth celebrating. And that is worth patting yourself on the back for. So keep at it, entrepreneurs. Like, keep your chin up, keep being strong, keep pressing in, keep turning up all the time to serve your customers and to serve your business. And obviously, if anyone needs any help around marketing, I'm always happy to have a conversation with you. So reach out to me on social. You can find all the links on chasingtheinsights.com. But just reach out to me and look, we'll spark up a conversation. You never know what comes from it.
Thank you very much, Vince, for sharing your rich experience with us today on the Entrepreneur Speaks podcast. We wish you the very best.
It has been an absolute honor, Coffee. Thank you so much.
This has been another amazing interaction with Vince Warnock on the Entrepreneur Speaks podcast. I'll come your way next time with another amazing interview. As always, take good care of yourself, and let's continue to keep hope alive. Cheers.